You're listening to Welcome to Eloma, a podcast for highly ambitious dreamers who get shit done. I'm your host, Kiley Peters. This is a space where we talk about mergers and acquisitions. So for many of us business owners, many of us started our businesses because we wanted to do the thing we knew how to do, right? We also know that many of us probably fall into the category of quote unquote accidental business owners, which oftentimes means that we started our business without thinking about how we wanted to end our business. And the truth is that all of our tenure with our businesses will end at some point, right? Like either we die or we sell or we exit or whatever, right? It comes to an end. So there's that, right? But when that happens, there's a lot that we don't know. And so for anybody out there who's thinking about like, well, what is my exit plan? And could it be beneficial to either acquire another company to build my business or to get acquired so I can cash out and have a payday, anything like that? There's a lot of nuances in the mergers and acquisition space that we don't really know about. So we're going to do our best to get you at least some of those answers today. Today's guest is Lori Murphree, the founder and managing partner at Evalla Advisors. And Evalla Advisors focuses specifically on advising mid-market businesses on mergers and acquisitions within the marketing services, digital media, and e-commerce space. So I'm going to do my best to get you some of the answers. We're just probably going to hit the tip of the iceberg today, but we'll at least get the conversation started on what it looks like to consider mergers and acquisitions for your business. So welcome to Eloma, Lori.
Thank you.
Lori, so before we dive too far into anything, for anybody listening and they're like, yeah, mergers and acquisitions sounds really sexy, but what does that mean? Can you give us just a high-level overview of what that could potentially entail?
All right. Well, I mean, it's either, it is typically when a company is buying another company or merging with another company. Mm-hmm. So, and from our standpoint, we're merger and acquisition advisors. We're technically an investment bank, but we consult companies on selling their company, merging their company sometimes, or divesting parts of their company, or we consult buyers as well on actually acquiring smaller companies typically.
So, okay.
Yeah.
And what situations might a founder or CEO potentially of another company, right? What situations might they find themselves in where they're considering a merger or acquisition for their company?
Well, I honestly think they should find themselves in that situation when they start their company.
Okay.
That is, really when you should start thinking about this. And like you said, some people accidentally get into business. As soon as they know they're a business, to me, they should think about what is the exit? And maybe it's 20 years down the line, but they should think about it like it's in 5 years. Because, you have to think about preparing with growth, with, the right financial profile. You have to think about it through, what you're doing, what strategically fits. And the reason I say that is because if you think about it from the start, your company typically does better, regardless if you want to exit or not. Because
go ahead. I was going to say, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. If you're preparing from day one, I want to exit my business, you're thinking about growth. You're thinking about what you're doing strategically different than other people, because obviously if a buyer is looking at you, they're not looking at you always just because you do exactly what they do. And if you can differentiate yourself, then obviously you're going to be able to sell yourself better and grow faster. And then from a financial management standpoint, if you're thinking about it, depending on the industry you're in, but if you're in marketing services, you shouldn't be thinking, you got to think about how are you going to invest so that you can get that payback, meaning the EBITDA, the cash flow. Mm-hmm. And so if you're thinking about all of those things and putting everything in order, your company's going to be growing. You may never want to exit, but because you're thinking about it, you're actually bringing home a lot of money to yourself.
Yeah.
So to me, the situation is the minute you open your doors and the minute you start selling something, you should be thinking, how do I exit? Regardless if you ever want to exit.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I love that perspective because you're right. Like some people out there and even anyone listening might be thinking, well, like I hear what you're saying, but I love my business and I never want to, like, I want it to be a lifestyle business, but I love what you're saying and saying that even if your mindset shifts to what a potential exit would look like, you end up still benefiting because you're building it as if it could potentially be up for sale at some point.
And what usually happens when people say it's a lifestyle business and I never want to sell is they go for 20 years and they eventually have to retire. Maybe something horrible happens. Maybe they just want to spend something, some time with their kids, whatever it is. But what's happened is they then come to an advisor and their revenue is completely flat. It's not grown. Even if they're making 2 or 3 million bottom line every year, it's still not grown. Mm-hmm. And so they come in thinking they're going to exit and they're going to get this big amount of money, and they don't, because somebody's looking for future growth. And if they don't see that you've ever grown or that you've grown the first couple of years and you were flat the whole time after, mm-hmm. even if you have a great business, it makes it harder to sell.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. So that's one of the things of, even if you're a lifestyle business, right? If you think that, then you have to think, okay, I'm never going to get that amount.
Sure.
I'm going to shut down or, do a ESOP where your employees buy it. That's one way to get out. We don't advise on ESOPs, but you can do an ESOP. But there are benefits and challenges to that, right?
Yeah.
Company with debt, basically.
Yeah. Okay. So you're touching on right now, like what your EBITDA cash flow growth looks like, even if you want to quote unquote keep it a lifestyle business, you never want to sell, right? So what are some other things that founders should be thinking about when it comes to, okay, so maybe I don't know what I want to do. Maybe it is a lifestyle. Maybe I do want to sell, but what is the time frame and what are the key things people need to think about in terms of preparing their business so it can be an attractive opportunity for acquisition?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things with that. And there's attractive opportunity and there's also just being prepared. Sure. And I think, I do think if you were to think of it 5 years out, it's the best time to think of it. If you're 3 years out, that's okay. And the reason being is I always tell people, don't only talk to me, talk to advisors ahead of time. Don't say, I'm not ready. I'm going to talk to you when I'm ready. Talk to them ahead of time because they will start giving you advice, but also talk to wealth advisors. Because wealth advisors will set you up in a tax area that allows you to sell your business and not have 50% of it go to the government, right? Or 30 or whatever, right? Which is a huge thing if you think of all of these things ahead of time.
Yeah.
And the other thing is you want to think about your clients. Like if you have one big client, a client concentration, anything over 20% really is a client concentration. And so if you have one client that is the majority of your revenue, that's a red flag for anybody who's trying to acquire you. And it's a hard one to get over because if you lose that client, whole business is gone. And so that's huge. I think getting to a certain scale is important. Again, it depends on what industry you're in. If you're in a technology business, you're looking at revenue. If you're in a service business, you shouldn't be looking at revenue. You should be looking at your EBITDA, your earnings before interest, tax, depreciation. And that number, if you're in a service business, gets much more interesting around $2 or $3 million.
So wait, what do you mean when you say that? It's much like if you have a $2 or $3 million
So
EBITDA as a service-based industry?
yes, because
Okay.
there are a lot of service companies that have 500,000, even up to a million. There's like, 80% of them, right? Are smaller. So
Mm-hmm.
the thing is you want to get into a bracket that is not as prominent, right? You want to be different. And
Got it.
differentiation comes from your services. It comes from the technology you use and how technologically enabled you are. It also comes from your actual numbers, right? That's a
Mm-hmm.
different factor that I don't think a lot of people think about.
Yeah.
And it comes from culture and it comes from the people. But a lot of people will say we're different because of our culture. And so as a buyer, they've talked to 50 people, maybe 300 people in a year. I mean, easily, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every single one of those people says we're different because of people. So it's great that you're different because of people. It's great that you have a great culture. I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot different from where you started.
Yeah.
Everybody said that. So
Yeah.
what people don't realize is that when it shows, like when you have amazing clients, when you've done work that's won awards, when you've kept your clients for a really long time, when you've kept your people for a really long time,
Mm-hmm.
right? That actually shows that you have really great people and a really great,
Mm.
so
Show, don't tell.
as people focus on saying that they're something, you have to show it. And the way people see it is via the numbers. And it doesn't have to be financial numbers in the money, but it has to be numbers. What's your employee turnover? What's your client turnover? Have you grown your clients? Have they, is it just one client? Are they, a bunch of clients? And then look at the actual numbers of revenue, EBITDA, margins. Are you able to look at your margin per client?
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot that people kind of breeze over because they think, okay, it's good work and we're nice people, but you have to measure it somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I know for a lot of owners, like I always say, you can't really run a successful company if you don't know your numbers. But I think the other part of that is you have to know which numbers you need to know. Right. And so I love that you had mentioned, so you said if it was a tech company, you're looking at revenue. If you're a service-based company, you're looking at EBITDA.
Yep.
So that's
And
really helpful. Yeah, go ahead.
it doesn't mean on a service that you have to always optimize the EBITDA because sometimes you're going to have to invest in people, but
Yeah,
you got
for
to
sure.
know when you're going to invest, right? Because if you are going to sell, you don't want to invest that year that you're selling because your EBITDA will drop.
Yeah, for sure. So I've heard that like that the 3 years leading up. So I hear you, like plan from day one. 5 years out, you're probably in good shape. 3 years out is like really when you want to make sure you're, whatever. What are the key things that you want to make sure you're doing or not doing in those 3 years leading up to a potential merger acquisition? To make sure like your financials are looking healthier. Like what are the, in that 3 year window leading up to the big day, what's really important?
I would say before you hit the 3-year mark, make sure all of your legal is in place
Okay.
with whatever you need on the tax benefit side. Work with the wealth advisor and the lawyer before 3 years because at 3 years, when somebody acquires you, it has to be, all of those things have to be in place for 3 years at least to get the benefits.
Minimum of 3 years.
Yeah. So you
Yeah.
have to do it before the 3 years for that part of it. So
Are you talking about like C Corps and stuff, like capital gains tax?
capital gains, but there's also putting your assets in a trust, for instance.
Ah, okay.
And I won't because I don't do that part of it, but there are
Sure.
many wealth advisors that do that part of it.
Okay.
And really important part. And your assets have to be in a trust for 3 years in order to be able to sell it within the trust and not pay all of your taxes at once. Yeah, exactly. So
I see.
there's a lot more that is not my, that's not my forte, but that's why I tell people talk to a wealth advisor first.
Yeah.
Because they can help you if it's more than 3 years out.
Okay, so that's from like the personal side of, the founder's personal side of like, hey, protect your ass, make sure you're not paying crazy taxes, get a trust in place, talk to a wealth advisor, etc. From the business standpoint, what are the really,
You need your numbers super clean. You need to, it's helpful to have audits. It's helpful to make sure you're on accrual basis in accounting. So yeah, because people just do cash basis, and that is that's difficult because every buyer is going to want you to be on US GAAP. And so get your accounting straightened out so that you are on US GAAP. That's actually a very big thing.
And what is US GAAP for anybody listening who's like, what is US GAAP?
It is the standard accounting policies I don't know how to explain it. It's standard accounting policies.
But it's tied to accrual base versus cash base.
Exactly. It has to accrual base versus cash base.
Okay.
Which means your revenues and your profit are coming in at the time you're doing the service. There's different ways. Again, but making sure everything's on GAAP. You don't need audited financials. Some people, as they get bigger, should get audited depending on how big you are. But making sure that all is, maybe getting reviewed statements is helpful from an accountant.
Okay.
Like $20,000 a year or something, right? But it's helpful. For 3 years, having that is super helpful. Making sure that you have the right employees and you're going on the right strategic direction for 3 years out. Because a lot of times you're thinking about it and then you have to switch. And you're always going to have to switch a little bit. But you really, the 3 years before a sale, you don't want to have to switch, because that means your revenue and everything in your business is going to do a little roller coaster. You want straight growth for 3 years.
At what percentage? Like, is it just you want to see growth, or you want to see like 20% year over year? Like, what does that look like?
20% or more is the best.
Okay.
But again, depending on where you are, we do mid-market, and I would say, you want to be at 2 million, starting at 2 million EBITDA and going on a 20% up from there. That's ideal, right? Or more than 20%, 20 to 30%. With that, you still want to maintain a healthy margin, 20%. So 20% margin, even 25% growth. That's probably ideal if you can get to 20% margin, 25% growth. But somewhere in that kind of range is what you're going to do.
Nice.
Without a client concentration.
Yeah. Just because I know so many service-based entities are also looking at passive revenue to kind of supplement that. Would you say that that would be similar if you had like a passive revenue, like a membership or digital downloads or anything like that?
People love that. Yeah. Having any kind of recurring revenue, I think, is a great way to supplement it. And it also increases your margins.
Yeah, for sure.
And it also shows sometimes reliance on technology being tech enabled,
and that's good.
Very good.
Okay.
Because if you're integrating it in, that means you're a tech enabled business versus just the service business. If you're utilizing something, hopefully, that other people aren't, perhaps it's a little bit of a differentiator. It's not, I would say it's not as much of a differentiator these days, because most people are tech enabled. Yeah. And a lot of investors, or if you're looking at private equity, or a lot of people are looking at, when they look at an acquisition, they're basically saying it's a standard. It's not even yeah, we're going to give you more value. It's, you have to have some kind of technology
to step up to the plate.
It doesn't mean that that's who you are. If you're a creative agency, for instance, you're a creative agency, but if you're utilizing technology for lots of things, people are looking for, people utilizing technology even for creative ideas these days, right?
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. I'm taking lots of notes over here. This is all fascinating. Now, let me flip the script a little bit. So if somebody is like, all right, I'm looking to grow, I want to acquire a company, or maybe it's both sides. What are the red flags to look for if you are looking to sell and you are looking to buy? I think we've probably talked about some red flags to buy, but red flags, as somebody's looking to sell their business and they get excited, right? But there's always those red flags. Like, what are some of the biggest ones, maybe on both sides?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, the buyer will be looking for it and the seller has to watch out for it. One of the biggest ones that people don't think about is employee turnover. That's and they say they have a great culture, and then you look and you see that 30% of the people have left. And they say it's because of money or whatever. But I can tell you, I know agencies that keep their employees that pay them less than industry standard. So it can't just be because of money, right? It is sometimes, but not it's that high. So that's one. Client turnover is the other. Typically, you might lose 20% of your clients. Keep more than that. Try not to lose 20%.
Year over year. Yeah.
Turnover of clients and turnover of employees is huge. And some people get in because they're great. I find that business owners are typically very charismatic, and they're typically very good business development people. Mm-hmm. And so they're constantly out there doing the BD, which is great. And they can show this growth. But then when a buyer gets in and looks at, but have you kept these clients? And and it's just constantly churning. It's like, well, what happens when the owner leaves?
Yep. That's a good call. You have to be able to get them in the door and then keep them.
So I think those are probably two of the biggest red flags. The other one is if somebody hasn't told you something. We had deals when I was on the buy side where the seller forgot to mention that he had gone bankrupt twice before.
Oh.
We found one and he told us.
Oh, wow.
It was important because it doesn't have to do with this company, but he went bankrupt. And then we found another even after that. And we forgave him for the first one.
Wow.
You have to share everything. And I think people are scared to share their financials and scared to share stuff. But the truth is once that NDA is in place, a buyer cannot do anything with that information. They're not going to go out and say, oh, so-and-so has this much revenue. Share.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
I mean, yes, you don't want to just throw them anything, right? You want to put it together. You want to look at it and all of that. But ultimately, you need to be truthful and you need to be upfront and leaving that information, even if you're not, obviously in the documentation, it will cover it. But even at the earliest stages, figure out what the issues are and, use an advisor to spin the story however you want, but make sure you
are honest, upfront.
Honest.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a ton of sense. This is a huge transaction, and one built a lot on trust. And so wow, I didn't tell you I went bankrupt twice, not once, but twice. Wow.
After the second one, we gave up and cut them off.
I would be like, well, I don't think this is the right fit.
Unfortunately, it happens all the time. And I think as a seller is always like, well, why are they asking me for all of this? And it's really hard work. It's a lot of stuff. Even if you have an advisor, we can't get everything for you. Sometimes I think if you don't have somebody in-house that's doing it, you should hire outside help. Spend the money because it's going to help you. You have to continue on your business, but you still, it takes a ton of time. And so, but they have to also, the seller has to realize that the buyer has to ask these questions. Because they may be the honest, most wonderful people in the world, the buyer has had many experiences where they thought they were the most wonderful person in the world, and they left out things like, bankruptcy, right? And so, I think from the seller standpoint, I guess red flags on the buyer is making sure they have enough cash, making sure the buyer has enough cash is important. And if they don't have the cash in-house, what is their debt facility, and looking at that. It shouldn't kill a deal, but that's probably the biggest one.
Okay.
And then making sure they like them. Don't sell to somebody you don't like. I mean, you're going to be miserable. You're never going to make the earn out. If you can't stand the people, just say no. Just don't do it. And it's a hard, I think even as an advisor, we might meet a buyer and think they're great, but our client will meet them and say we hate them, right? And, I think there's a certain part about being open-minded, because the buyer will always be focused on the numbers, whereas the seller may not be. And they may say, yeah, but they have to like us because of so many other things. But again, it's a business. They're running a business, right?
Yeah.
You have to be somewhat open-minded and realize some of it is about that. But on the other end, you have to make sure that the other parts, the buyer also is asking about culture, people.
Yeah. So
really into and understanding like what the seller does. Because sometimes they don't actually understand. So that's, so you want to make sure the buyer understands it a little bit. Otherwise, it could be a world of hurt once you get in there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know even just on a small scale, there can be a real breakdown in communication sometimes on what XYZ means to actually execute against it. Lori, when we're talking about mergers and acquisition deals, I know we've talked about 5 years, we've talked about the 3 years. How long does it typically take for a deal to complete from start to finish?
I mean, it honestly really varies. Most people will say 7 to 9 months.
Okay.
I would say, I've seen deals close in 4 or 5 months, which is completely abnormal.
Okay.
But and I guess if there's already a buyer, that's absolutely normal. But if you're going through a process of selling and you're talking to a lot of people, which is what we do, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'll break it down into 9 months, which is there's 3 months of prep work. So that's us coming in, digging through all of your materials, playing devil's advocate, looking at the numbers, looking at the people, looking at the turnover, looking at all the services, and developing a full SIM, which is a confidential information memorandum that is a very large document. It has everything about your business.
Mm-hmm.
Develop a one-pager. We'll spend a shitload of time on the buyers to make sure they're the right buyers for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first 3 months. The second 3 months is us out there calling, marketing to maybe 100 people, right? We're calling them, we're talking to them. A lot of times we know them because we're very focused on the industry.
Yeah, for sure.
But it still takes time to go back and forth. They might be busy. They might have other things going on. And then we're meetings, we're getting to an LOI. Once we get to that LOI, we hope to have that LOI signed in those 3 months at the end of this second.
That's letter of interest.
Letter of interest.
Yep.
Sometimes we'll go to an IOI, which is an indication of interest first, depending on the amount of people. Okay. And we'll do more diligence. And then once you sign the LOI, which is non-binding, but it basically gives the buyer 60 to 90-day exclusivity to then get the deal done.
Okay.
So typically, they might put 60, they might put 90. Typically, I would say 90. So then you have 3 months to close the deal. So that's documentation, diligence, going through with lawyers back and forth, negotiating the finer points, and then close it. So that's an easy way to look at 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. Sometimes different parts take longer.
Yeah. So. Okay. Well, good to know for anybody out there who's considering it. All right, Lori, as we get wrapped up here, I think the work you do is so fascinating. And, as I've spent my career in the creative space, I love that you've carved this out as a niche for yourself. For you, and feel free to answer this for you as a human or you as part of your company, right? What impact do you want to make on the world, or what legacy do you want to leave?
No, well, we want to change the reputation of investment banking. We want to let everybody know that you can be a really good person. It can be.
I love that.
You'll be an investment banker, right? No, it's very true, though. I mean, I think there's a lot of great people in this industry that unfortunately don't get noticed because of what people think of investment bankers. And I think when somebody thinks of an investment banker, they think of a guy with a buttoned-up shirt and a tie and his calculator. And I think, we need to look further. We need to look more strategically. And I was lucky enough to start my career in an amazing firm that, had, 30% of my incoming class was female, which was huge back 20 years ago. And, still to this day, there's probably 2 women that I know that are at my level, at managing partner or managing director level.
Yeah, it's hard to find ladies doing this work at that level, for sure.
So, the goal with Evalla and where the word Evalla comes from is evolve in Alahi. Alahi means to change in Greek. And so it was to evolve and change mergers and acquisitions, change this industry. And, from that, we are very focused on having a very diverse team. And not just to have a diverse team, but to actually be able to look at things differently. Partnerships and look at where strategic fits might be where nobody else may have looked. And to make sure that everything we do is with the highest integrity. And, the goal is to build this firm quite big and to make sure that people know it and can see. And to have women see, we're hoping to be 50% women.
It'd be amazing.
We have, different gender identity, different race, different nationalities. And so, that is the goal.
I love it. All right. My last question for you, Lori, as an entrepreneur yourself, what is your greatest insight or discovery about life and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think that's probably the hardest one. I think
that was by design.
I think one is, now that I've done this and I'm building this and we've hired our first employee and I'm responsible for his salary, and he actually is a British citizen. So I'm also responsible for his life, I feel like.
That's a lot.
I think I've learned, and I've always heard people say, the pressure of being an entrepreneur, especially when you're starting out, to make sure that you're on it. I now feel what my clients feel, I guess you can say. And I always kind of understood it, but now I really understand it.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing. And, I think it also, the other part of that is learning balance. as an entrepreneur. And I would say, I think most people would say they don't have as much balance as an entrepreneur. I'm going the opposite direction. I'm actually getting more balance. And the reason is because I'm so focused on making sure that our employees have balance, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to burn them out. And so from that, I have to set that by an example.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always had a very strong work ethic, and I think, I work quite hard, but taking time out to make sure that you're balanced is important. And I think it helps.
Yeah, absolutely. Lori, you are amazing. Thank you so much. For anyone listening who's like, I need to get in touch with this lady, what's the best way for them to find you?
You can reach out via email. It's Lori at EvallaAdvisors.com. That's probably the easiest, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah. And just drop me an email, and happy to respond and let them know that Kiley sent you.
Awesome. All right. We'll make sure that's in the show notes. For anyone listening who has enjoyed Lori's incredible words of wisdom as much as I have, please go ahead and leave a review wherever you're listening. And Lori, thank you so much for joining us on the show. I have so many notes, and just really appreciate you sharing your wisdom.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
To continue learning how to better build your business and make your vision a reality, subscribe to the Welcome to Eloma email list at welcometoeloma.com.